It started with a simple question at breakfast. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to get my 4-year-old daughter engaged in conversation. She looked at me with those impossibly serious eyes and said, "Which name? Emma or Mary Catherine?" "What? Do you mean, which name?" "Emma is my name now. But before, when I was different, my name was Mary Catherine Walsh. Mary Catherine Walsh." Not a name we had ever mentioned in our house. Not a character from her books or shows. A complete, formal name delivered with the confidence of someone introducing themselves at a business meeting. Who is Mary Catherine Walsh? Emma? Me. Before I was me. She said it so simply, like having multiple identities across different lifetimes was as normal as having different outfits for different occasions. When you were Mary Catherine, where did you live? In the town with the big white church and the cemetery on the hill. What cemetery? The one where Mary Catherine is buried. I can show you if you want. My blood turned cold. My 4-year-old daughter was offering to take me to her own grave. My name is Jessica, and this is the story of how my daughter Emma led us on a journey to a cemetery we'd never visited, to find a headstone with a name she'd never heard, to stand before her own grave from a life she'd never lived. Emma had always been unusual about death. While other children her age were blissfully unaware of mortality, Emma spoke about death like it was just another part of existence. "When people die, where do they go?" I had asked her once, expecting the typical 4-year-old response about heaven or angels. "They go underground for a while, but their real selves float up and wait to be born again." "Have you ever died, Emma?" "Yes. Mary Catherine died when she was 6, but that's okay because then she got to be Emma." "How did Mary Catherine die?" "She got very sick. Her throat hurt and she couldn't breathe good. And she got really hot, but also really cold at the same time." The clinical accuracy of her description was unsettling. Fever, respiratory distress, difficulty swallowing. Symptoms that a 4-year-old shouldn't be able to articulate with such precision. "Were you scared when Mary Catherine was dying?" "A little. But Mama Helen held her hand and sang songs until Mary Catherine went to sleep." Mama Helen. Another specific name, another relationship that didn't exist in Emma's current life. What songs did Mama Helen sing? Amazing Grace and Jesus Loves Me. The songs that make dying not scary. Emma began humming Amazing Grace with perfect pitch and timing, but we had never taught her that hymn. We weren't particularly religious, and Emma had never attended church. Yet she sang it like she had heard it hundreds of times. "Emma, where did you learn that song?" Mama Helen sang it to Mary Catherine every night when she was sick. "What else do you remember about being Mary Catherine?" "She lived in a white house with blue flowers in the front yard. And she had a baby, brother named Timothy, who cried a lot." "What about Mary Catherine's daddy?" "Papa John worked at the mill. He had big hands that were always dirty, but they were gentle when he tucked Mary Catherine into bed." Papa John, Mama Helen, baby Timothy. Complete family structure that Emma described with intimate detail. "Emma, do you miss being Mary Catherine?" "Sometimes. Especially Mama Helen. She had soft hands and she smelled like bread and flowers." "Why don't you miss Papa John and Timothy?" "Because they're not dead yet. Maybe I'll see them again someday when they get born into new families." The matter-of-fact way she discussed the logistics of reincarnation was both fascinating and disturbing, like she had first-hand knowledge of how the process worked. Over the next few weeks, Emma provided more details about Mary Catherine's life. She described the town where Mary Catherine had lived, small, rural, centered around a textile mill where most of the men worked, a single main street with a general store, a post office, and a white wooden church with a tall steeple. The church had colored windows that made pretty lights on Sunday mornings, Emma told me. Mary Catherine liked to watch the colors dance on the floor during the long prayers. What was the church called? St. Matthew's, and Pastor William had a really loud voice that echoed off the walls. Pastor William, another specific name, Another verifiable detail. What else was in the town? The cemetery was on a hill behind the church. Mary Catherine could see it from her bedroom window. Was that scary for her? No, because she knew all the people buried there. Mrs. Henderson, who used to give her cookies. Old Mr. Fletcher, who told funny stories. Baby Sarah, who died before. Mary Catherine got sick. She spoke about the deceased residents of this cemetery like she was discussing neighbors she had known personally. Emma, you said you could show me Mary Catherine's grave. How would you know where it is? Because Mary Catherine went to lots of funerals there. She knows where everyone is buried. But how would you know where Mary Catherine is buried? Emma looked at me like I had asked an obvious question. Because Mary Catherine watched them bury her. Dead people can see their own funerals. You watched your own funeral? Yes. Mama Helen cried so much, and Papa John had to hold her up. And Timothy was too little to understand why everyone was sad. What did the funeral look like? Lots of people came. Everyone from the mill and all the ladies from church. They put Mary Catherine in a white dress with pink flowers, and they put her in a box with soft white fabric inside. A casket. She was describing her own casket. Where did they bury the box? Under the big oak tree, next to baby Sarah. Mama Helen said Mary Catherine would have someone to play with in heaven. Is there a headstone? Yes. It says Mary Catherine Walsh, beloved daughter, 1918-1924. 1918-1924, specific dates. A 6-year lifespan that matched what Emma had told me about Mary Catherine dying at age 6. Emma, how do you know what the headstone says if Mary Catherine died in 1924? Because Mary Catherine's spirit visits her grave sometimes, to check on Mama Helen when she comes to put flowers there. Mama Helen still visits the grave? She did for a long time. Every Sunday after church, she would bring daisies because those were Mary Catherine's favorite flowers. The level of detail was staggering. The emotional specificity was impossible. But Emma was 4 years old. How could she know about funeral practices from the 1920s? How could she describe death and burial with such accuracy? That weekend, I decided to test Emma's claims. Emma, you said you could show me Mary Catherine's grave. Would you like to try? She nodded enthusiastically. Yes, I want to show you where Mary Catherine is buried so you know she's real. Do you know how to get there? Sort of. I know it's the town with the big white church and the mill by the river. Not much to go on. But Emma seemed confident that she would recognize the place when she saw it. We loaded into the car and started driving through rural areas outside our city. Emma sat in her car seat, staring out the window with intense concentration. Not this way, she would say when I turned down certain roads. That way, she would point when we approached intersections. For 2 hours, she directed our route through countryside I had never seen before. Small farming communities, winding roads, isolated churches. There, Emma suddenly shouted. There's the white church. I looked ahead and saw a small white wooden church with a tall steeple. St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, according to the sign. That's it, Mama. That's where Mary Catherine went to church. Owie! Pulled into the parking lot and looked around. The church was exactly as Emma had described. White wood construction, tall steeple, stained glass windows. Behind the church, on a hill, I could see a cemetery. The graveyard is up there, Emma said, pointing toward the hill. Mary Catherine is under the big oak tree. We walked up the hill to the cemetery. It was old, established, with headstones dating back to the 1800s. Emma walked confidently among the graves, like she was following a familiar path. This way, she said, past Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Fletcher. She stopped at specific graves and read the names aloud. There's Mrs. Henderson. She died in 1923. And there's Mr. Fletcher. He died in 1922. The dates match the time frame of Mary, Catherine's life. How do you know these people, Emma? Mary Catherine knew them when they were alive. Mrs. Henderson lived next door and gave Mary Catherine cookies on Sundays. Mr. Fletcher worked at the mill with Papa John. She continued walking with purpose, navigating the cemetery like she had visited it hundreds of times. "There's baby Sarah," she said, stopping at a small grave marker. "She died when she was only 1 year old." The headstone read, "Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, 1923-1924, our angel baby." And there, Emma's voice grew quiet. "There's Mary Catherine." She was standing in front of a weathered headstone under a massive oak tree. I approached slowly, my heart pounding. The inscription made my hands shake. "Mary Catherine Walsh, beloved daughter, 1918-1924. She walks with angels now." Below the inscription was a carved image of daisies. Everything Emma had told me. All of it carved in stone. All of it real. All of it impossible. "That's me," Emma said softly. "When I was Mary Catherine." "Emma, how did you know this grave was here?" "Because Mary Catherine told me. She wanted you to know that her other life was real." I knelt beside the headstone, running my fingers over the carved letters. "Mary Catherine Walsh, 9/18/1924, 6 years old when she died, the same age Emma was now." "Emma, what happened to Mary Catherine's family?" "Mama Helen died a few years later. She missed Mary Catherine too much and got sick with sadness. Papa John moved away with Timothy to find work in a big city." "Are there other graves here for Mary Catherine's family?" "Just Mama Helen, over there by the fence." Emma led me to another section of the cemetery. There, near the fence line, was another headstone. "Helen Walsh, devoted wife and mother, 1895-1927, reunited with her beloved daughter." Helen, Walsh, Mama Helen, died 3 years after Mary Catherine. "She's buried here so she could be close to Mary Catherine," Emma explained. "Even though Papa John and Timothy moved away, Mama Helen couldn't leave Mary Catherine alone." I was crying now, standing in a cemetery I had never visited, reading headstones, for people I had never known, but whom my 4-year-old daughter remembered with perfect clarity. "Emma, are you sad being here?" "A little, but also happy." "Why happy?" "Because now you know Mary Catherine was real, and because Mary Catherine isn't alone anymore." "What do you mean?" "Mary Catherine was waiting for someone to remember her, to know that she lived and was loved. Now Emma remembers, so Mary Catherine can rest." We spent another hour in the cemetery. Emma showed me other graves of people Mary Catherine had known. She told me stories about their lives, their relationships, their roles in the small Milltown community, all details that could potentially be verified if historical records still existed. On the drive home, Emma was unusually quiet. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "Yes, but I think this is the last time I'll remember Mary Catherine this clearly." "Why?" "Because she got to show you her grave. Now she can let go and let Emma be just Emma." "Will you miss remembering Mary Catherine?" "A little. But it's okay. Emma has her own life to live." "Do you think Mary Catherine is happy now?" "Yes, because someone knows her story, and because Emma will never forget that love doesn't end when people die." Over the next few months, Emma's memories of Mary Catherine gradually faded. The detailed accounts became hazier. The specific knowledge of the cemetery and town became less precise. By her 5th birthday, Emma rarely mentioned Mary Catherine at all, but something had changed in her. A depth of understanding about life and death that seemed far beyond her years. "Mama," she told me recently, "do you think other kids remember being someone else before?" "Some of them might." "Why?" "Because maybe that's how we learn to be kind. By remembering that everyone was someone before, and everyone will be someone again." "What do you mean?" "Like, if you remember dying, you know how precious life is. And if you remember being loved and losing people you love, you know how important it is to be nice to everyone. Is that why you remembered Mary Catherine? To learn about kindness? Maybe. Or maybe Mary Catherine just wanted someone to visit her grave and bring her flowers. Last month, we returned to St. Matthew's Cemetery. Emma, now 5, remembered the location, but had lost most of the specific details about Mary Catherine's life. We brought daisies, Mary Catherine's favorite flowers. Emma placed them on the grave and whispered something I couldn't hear. What did you say to Mary Catherine? I told her thank you for letting me borrow her memories, and I promised to take good care of the love she taught me. What love did she teach you? The love that says goodbye isn't forever. That families find each other again, even if they look different. Do you think you'll see Mary Catherine again someday? Maybe. Or maybe I'll meet Mama Helen and Papa John and Timothy in my next life. Family is bigger than just one lifetime. We also visited Helen Walsh's grave. Emma placed flowers there too, for being such a good mama to Mary Catherine, and for loving her so much that even death couldn't separate them. An elderly man approached us as we were leaving. "Excuse me," he said. "I couldn't help but notice you visiting the Walsh graves." "Did you know them?" I asked. My grandfather worked at the mill with John Walsh, used to tell stories about the family. Tragic what happened to that little girl. What did your grandfather say about them? Said John Walsh never got over losing his daughter and wife, moved, away with his son and never came back. But every year until he died, he'd send money to the church to maintain their graves. He never visited? Couldn't bear to, but he made sure they were never forgotten. Timothy, Mary Catherine's baby brother, still taking care of his sister and mother from afar, still honoring the family he had lost. Do you know what happened to Timothy? Died a few years back. Never married, no children, but in his will, he left money to keep maintaining those graves in perpetuity. Emma tugged on my sleeve. That's Timothy taking care of Mary Catherine, she whispered. Even though he's old now, he still remembers his sister. That night, Emma asked if we could adopt the Walsh graves. What do you mean? Like, visit them sometimes and make sure they have flowers. So Mary Catherine and Mama Helen know they're not forgotten. Would you like that? Yes, because everyone deserves to have someone remember them. Even people who died before we were born? Especially people who died before we were born, because they don't have anyone left to miss them. We now visit St. Matthew's Cemetery every few months. Emma brings flowers and tells me stories about the people buried there. Not specific memories anymore, but general feelings about their lives and loves and losses. This is where the mill workers are buried, she'll say. They worked hard to take care of their families. And this is where the children are buried. They were loved so much, even though they didn't get to grow up. Her connection to the cemetery has evolved from personal memory to universal compassion, from remembering being Mary Catherine to honoring all the Mary Catherines who lived and died and were loved. Last week, Emma asked if we could research other old cemeteries. Why? Because there might be other people who need someone to remember them. You want to remember other people who died before you were born? Not remember like I remembered Mary Catherine, but remember like keeping their stories alive. How would we do that? By visiting their graves and reading their names out loud. By bringing flowers and saying thank you for the lives they lived. Why is that important? Because love doesn't end when people die. But sometimes love gets lonely if nobody remembers it. Tonight, Emma is sleeping peacefully in her bed, no longer carrying the memories of a girl who died a century ago, but carrying something perhaps more important, the knowledge that every life matters, that every person who has ever lived deserves to be remembered, that love transcends the boundaries of individual lifetimes, and that sometimes the dead choose the living to be their voice, their witness, their continuation. "Mama," she said to me at bedtime, "do you think Mary Catherine is happy that I was her for a while?" "I think Mary Catherine is very happy. Because of you, her story didn't end with her death. And because of her, I know that Emma's story won't end with Emma's death either." "What do you mean?" "Someday, Emma might be someone else's memory, and that someone else will make sure Emma's love keeps going." "Is that how love stays alive forever?" "Yes, by being passed from one person to the next, like a gift that never gets used up." So I ask you this: when a 4-year-old child claims to have another name from another life, when they lead you to a grave they've never seen, with details they couldn't possibly know, when they remember loves and losses that belonged to someone who died before they were born, when they somehow become the keeper of memories that would otherwise be lost forever, do you dismiss it as imagination? Or do you consider that maybe death isn't the end of identity, but its transformation? That consciousness might survive the body and find new homes and new lives? That the dead might choose the living to carry their stories forward? That memory itself might be more than neural activity, might be something that transcends individual brains and individual lifetimes? I used to think death was the ultimate erasure. Now I know that love creates memories too strong to die, stories too important to end, connections too deep to sever. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we get to be the living repositories of love that refuses to be forgotten. The rest is just mystery, and some mysteries are too sacred to solve. They're meant to be lived, honored, remembered, passed on.